I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. What am I going with that? Kelowna Now. And I have on the phone with me Ian Burns, all the way from Ottawa. Little cloudy or hazy here in Kelowna today. How's the weather out there in Ottawa?
It's the calm before the storm. It's
Oh, right, you're
nice and
getting
sunny, and it looks like a beautiful winter's day. But 40 centimeters of snow is on its way, and everybody's panicking.
how exciting. Got that snow shovel all warmed up?
Yeah, well, I'll give it a go. But I don't know what the point is going to be. It's going to be like it said 5 centimeters an hour or something like that. So I mean, I might just wait till it's all done and then get it out.
Yeah. I remember when I used to live in Edmonton, you get those big dumps. I would actually go there in the middle there because if you wait too late, then it's like a lot of snow to try to move at once with the shovel. Back-breaking work.
It really is. I put my back out the other day doing it. It's very tough.
Yeah. Speaking of cold, Blacklocks did a story, Holiday and Blacklocks. Arctic shipping could be 300 days a year as climate change changes the planet uh, temperature, and right now it's gaining about a day a year. But a nuclear icebreaker would probably open up that port all the time if a couple of nuclear icebreakers like the Russians have, and we could open that port up, and we may need that port.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if Quebec remains recalcitrant and refuses to
Yeah.
allow resources to go to the Atlantic through that province, or even if Quebec were to separate, which is hardly inconceivable even now, is that? Then yeah, we would need it. I suppose we should say, I mean, I think most people probably already know this, but the reason that there's so much of a kind of business or economic obsession with ports and with waterways is because it's by such an enormous distance the cheapest way to transport goods. I mean, there's nothing comes even remotely close.
And it's about
To do it by land or to do it by air is many, 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 many times more expensive. So that's why people are so obsessed with ports and Churchill and a few others around there and Hudson Bay. That they're real assets. So it's right that we should be looking at them, I think.
It's Canada's most northerly deep water port, and when it was opened in 1931, it was shipping wheat to Liverpool in jolly old England. There,
Yeah, well, if you read novels from that era, like early 20th century England, they often talk about like Winnipeg wheat barons and stuff like that. It was a big sort of cultural phenomenon because the English obviously their population grew in excess of their agricultural capacity sometime in the 19th century. So they were reliant on imports, and Canada served that purpose for many, many years, including during the Second World War when Canadian wheat kept the English alive so that they could resist the Nazis.
so yeah, so the port's open about 16 weeks a year, so 4 months of the year that port is currently open. So I mean, they could start using that port for a lot of different things. And again, if we started building or maybe buy a nuclear icebreaker, we probably have to buy one. I don't know if we have the capability of making one, but more jobs, whether you're making or building and getting that port open. And I've lived in the north of Manitoba. Uh, Great fishing there as well, and beautiful northern lights.
Yeah, beautiful polar bears. If you like taxidermy, get yourself a polar bear.
There you go. Another story out of Hollydone and Blacklocks. I mean, I would suggest people go get a subscription to that service. It's about $314 a year. Great stories. They get a lot of good stuff. And this one coming out, the Christmas tax break is fizzled. This is the one that we were talking about over the last few days about how the feds said they needed to advertise on Meta because Canadians read their news on social media platforms, and they don't have access to news on platforms because their big fight with Meta, and that they've basically banned news on Meta. If they would just repeal that Bill C-18, we could again get our news on that platform, and maybe they could support Canadian instead of spending their money with Meta.
Well, the Prime Minister just within the last hour just told us how happy he is that Canadians are heeding the patriotic call and are buying Canadian. But I mean, that apparently does not include the federal government, which is choosing to buy from Donald Trump's tech ally, Mark Zuckerberg, at Meta.
Maybe you should call the Privy Council there because they've basically given everybody what they say permission now to start advertising on Meta because they wanted to
Yeah,
get
they've
this
opened the floodgates.
60-day GST holiday that was passed by Parliament at $2.7 billion cost. This Canadian Taxpayer Federation saying not worth the cost. The majority of storekeepers impacted by the tax break said no real impact on sales. Only 5% of small business said they saw stronger sales compared to the same period last year. The Federation said in a statement. A majority of retailers, 66%, said no change at all. By all accounts, the government's GST holiday was a flop for small businesses, said the Federation. And it ends. So if you want to stock up on tacos and tinsel, and Cheetos for that matter, now's your big chance.
Or books. If you
Or
really want to
books, yeah.
buy some fine literature, get it in now.
So you got 3 days.
Yeah.
And beer, too, beer and wine. And so you get a stockpile of taco chips, Cheetos, wine, beer, tinsel, and and a Christmas tree. They're on sale right now, probably. We talked about this yesterday. Ford CEO Jim Farley will travel to Washington on Wednesday to warn members of Congress that the 25% tariffs that Trump is proposing on Canada and Mexico will blow a hole in the U.S. auto industry. The impact of tariffs, which Trump delayed for last month, would be devastating for American auto workers, Farley said. And so there are people in the United States trying to get Trump to back off of these tariffs because like I said yesterday, our economies are so intertwined. All these punishing tariffs would do nothing but harm both sides of the border. So we're going to come to a clip from Kevin O'Leary, and it says that like Trump is just posturing. None of this is really going to happen, but he's really got everybody worked up on it, though. So for sure, and I guess in a good way is that we're going to finally explore other markets and maybe tap our natural wealth too and get off our comfort zone there.
Let's hope so. There's talk of it, not so much evidence yet, but let's see.
So Farley's last comment is so far what we're seeing is a lot of cost and a lot of chaos. So the automakers have they're a big component of the U.S. manufacturing hub. So the automakers have a lot to say, with Jim Farley of Ford and then Mary Barra of GM. I'm sure she's probably in on that. And Stellantis that just switched their CEO. So, all these costs are going to end up in the consumers, hitting the consumer.
But they're
Finally,
also, importantly, they're also based in the key now to winning presidential elections in the United States. They're based in that area,
in the swing
Michigan,
states.
and yeah, they're based in those really, really, like everything in an election, you throw everything at those states in the Great Lakes now. So it has a real disproportionate effect. Obviously, Trump thinks that doing what he's doing is going to secure his popularity there. Or I suppose he's thinking maybe he's answering their requests and he's repaying them for their votes. I guess he would probably phrase it that way because it's his second term now. But it remains to be seen what the people of those states actually think of this kind of thing.
Yeah, so like it's Canada appoints fentanyl czar finally. So Justin Trudeau appointed RCMP Kevin Brosseau, a longtime RCMP guy. So we finally have a border czar.
Yeah, and we've called it a czar, one of the stupidest naming traditions that's evolved over the last few years, isn't it? To
Yeah, I
call
don't think.
people basically Caesar, that's where that comes from. That's
Yeah,
the Russian version of the Roman emperor's title, Caesar.
the
So
media
we now
seemed
have a Caesar called Kevin Brosseau.
the media seemed to love that title too because that was a title that was thrown around on Kamala Harris and then Tom Holman and it just seems to be a very popular word to use. It's like it seems odd, right? Like we have all these czars now.
Yeah, I mean it is a bit ludicrous, isn't it? And it goes back to like Teddy Roosevelt, I think had, I don't know if you know much about Teddy Roosevelt, but when he kind of went and busted the trusts like all these big corporations that were seen to be kind of destroying American society. He created like a trust busting czar, something along those lines. And then his relative, FDR, the other Roosevelt, he also did something like that. But it's obviously ridiculous. I mean, the term czar, even if in the Russian context, it's a bit silly, isn't it? The czars were like despised autocrats who, massacred defenseless civilians, did all kinds of horrible things.
Yeah.
They're not people that you'd really want to be associated with. And then Caesar, obviously, which is where the word comes from. I mean, the Roman Empire is back in fashion a bit, but I don't think anybody wants to imitate the Caesars particularly, do they?
No. But our military back in focus too. The defense minister, Bill Blair, joined Justin Trudeau for a private meeting with NATO Secretary Mark Rutte in Brussels. Say they spoke about accelerating Canada's defense target to 2%.
He
So,
also said that he thinks that the Trump annexation threats are not real in his words. But
yeah,
that contradicts Trudeau, who said the other day that they are real. So
I
are
don't
they
believe
real or not?
I don't believe they're real myself. It's his bluster. That's his negotiating tactics, and he just kind of throws stuff out there. And I mean, it's our response that matters.
I think I think it's real, but I don't think it's real. I don't think they expect it to happen during the Trump presidency. I think they expect it to happen by the end of this century. But that's by no means unique to the Republican Party now or anything like that. That's been predicted now for decades by actual serious people, not Donald Trump and his sort of stupid utterances, but by actual real serious people have predicted that Canada and the US will merge at some point, or more like the US would take over Canada. So, I mean, I think probably the Trump team are aware of all that chat in academic circles and sort of geopolitical analyst circles, and they've just kind of like jumped on it. That's my feeling.
All 13 premiers in the U.S. for the first time in history. See, he's got some action though, and our premiers are actually out there doing some work. And Trudeau not there though. Trudeau on the world tour in Brussels right now. But the 13 premiers are there in Washington to push back on Trump's tariff threats. They do have a lot of support from a lot of uh, politicians in the United States because our economies are very intertwined.
Yeah, but they're all just a bit spineless, unfortunately, right now. The Republicans, the ones that can actually make a difference. I think they've been very cowed by Trump's victory, which was pretty convincing, wasn't it? And it wasn't very long ago. And I think he frightens them, and he's got a whole kind of apparatus in place now, and he has a system to punish people that he perceives to be disloyal. So I
Well,
think they're kind of keeping their heads down a bit, and they're being a little bit cowardly. But probably after the midterms, this is what Renee Merrifield keeps saying to you when you speak to her as well, and other people have said this. Once the midterms come around and the Republicans inevitably lose seats and lose their control of Congress, then you'll start to see these people chirp up, and then you'll see Trump start to be shackled and held back, I think.
yeah. Odd again. If we had, a parliament that was in session, we could probably have some of our parliamentarians joining in on this voice too. And you put up this story. BC Civil Liberties Association also now challenging the the prorogation of Parliament.
Yeah, they've just said that prorogation is supposed to be a serious thing, and that you're not supposed to do it, in their words, you're not supposed to do it to avoid public debate about political scandals or accountability at the polls, which is a reference to two things. One is, not the we scandal. That's out of date scandal. The environmental fund
Right? Yeah, the
scandal,
slush
which
fund.
is
Yeah.
the refusal of the Liberal Party to release certain documents that the opposition is demanding. That's what crippled Parliament. So that was a scandal, and that was why they couldn't do anything. That was one of the reasons given for the prorogation. And then accountability at the polls. Obviously, they under Justin Trudeau, things haven't really gone well for the Liberal Party at the polls in the last sort of 18 months. But No, it's they actually cite in the challenge, in the initial challenge, because this is not their challenge. They're just kind of like getting in on the action,
Yeah.
and this week, tomorrow and Friday. But the challenge itself is they actually cite the prorogation of Parliament by Boris Johnson in Britain during the I mean I don't know how many people really followed the Brexit malarkey, but there was a period in during the Brexit discussions where the whole British political system was kind of paralyzed. It was a very strange situation, and Boris Johnson just prorogued Parliament, very controversial. And then it later went to the sort of top court in England, and they found it to be illegal. It was an unlawful prorogation. But as is the way with things like this, it didn't really matter because the prorogation was a political move and it achieved its objective 100%. It was a complete success on a from a political perspective for the Conservative Party in England. And I sense that with this legal case, it could well be the same thing for the Liberals. That it's a success for the Liberals. They get what they wanted out of it, and even if they are chastised by the Supreme Court, what do they care? If they've got their victory. So, but we'll see. I guess we'll follow it.
Yeah, so that's happening tomorrow and Friday. So we'll see what comes out of that. And then the Trump tariffs on aluminum and steel. Like there's a National Post opinion piece out there saying we're the only game in town, so not sure what he's doing. And then, like one of the things that you and I talked about yesterday, why don't we just add a tax to it as well? If he wants 25% tariffs, let's just double it and put a tax on it. And then you're going to hear the people in the United States screaming because all of a sudden aluminum and steel will be up 50%. And then they'll have no choice but to back off the tariffs. I mean, just really make them choke on it. And
Yeah,
that's
well, they'll
that's
not be able
coming now
to.
from the Quebec premier. He says if Trump wants to follow through, I think we should consider putting export tariffs on products like aluminum where they really need us. And I mean, that's one way to say it. Hey, if you want a tariff, we'll help you. We'll actually double it for you. How's double or nothing?
And then you're gonna have to drink your Pepsi out of cardboard
Yeah.
boxes.
I
You
mean,
wouldn't
I
like
think
that, would you?
I think that would be like a smarter, more brilliant move because they actually need our aluminum. They need our energy. They need so many things instead of this, tit for tat thing where we're gonna like put a tax on ketchup and things like that. Just like they're trying to like slow down our exports of aluminum. Then just jack up the price of aluminum.
Well, it's
But there
about
you
who
go.
can take the pain, I guess, isn't
Yeah.
it? And politically, at the minute, you would say the wind is in the sails of Trump because he's just won the election, just
Yeah.
won his party has just won the other two houses of Congress. He's kind of in the ascendancy, whereas in Quebec, sorry, not Quebec, whereas in Canada, it's the whole political scene is in disarray. So I
Well,
guess when it's head to head like that, you would think the Americans are going to be better able to stomach that. But I mean, the markets as well aren't going to like this, haven't liked this so far. They're going to like it a lot less when the consequences actually play out. And Trump seems to be very sensitive to the markets, doesn't he? He kind of associates himself and his leadership with the performance of the market. So, uh, I mean, maybe it is the answer, and it will make him back off if we hold tight.
but it again highlights the need that we need Parliament back in session, and we need to establish the leader of Canada because there's so many voices out there, and that and they're preying on that weakness, right? Because there's Doug Ford, Danielle Smith, Scott Moe. Now we got all the premiers down there. Everybody trying to make a deal for themselves, and that's not a way to do it. And Trudeau, not even thinking it's important enough for him to be there. He's off in Brussels doing the world tour, and supposedly this is the most threatening we've had in our economy, and he's not even anywhere to be found.
Yeah, though I suppose the Liberals and Trudeau they would defend that by saying it's very important that he does that because we need as many friends as we can get when we're being targeted by the Americans.
I don't think
But I
he's the
mean,
deal maker because how do you make deals when you got like 2 weeks left in the job?
yeah, well, I guess this look, our assumption based on polls and just based on common sense is that Mark Carney will be Canada's Prime Minister in less than a month. Mark Carney happens to be a very a close associate and chum of Justin Trudeau in the same party as Justin Trudeau, obviously. So I guess speaking to Justin Trudeau, you as a foreign leader, you're going to be you're going to be informed about the sort of feelings of Mark Carney, aren't you, as well? So I guess that would be again the defense that it's like Trudeau's in a position where he can talk about the next prime minister of Canada, who's his friend, you know. So I guess there's a
Sounds
kind
pretty.
of
I hear
continuity there.
I hear the argument you're making. Sounds pretty weak to me though, but sure.
Well, you got
Um,
to try. You got to play devil's advocate, and you got to do your best.
I got a message this morning. Am I ready? Are you ready? We got the graphic. There you go. Are you ready, Jim? I got that from the Liberal Party this morning. Actually, Mark Carney in Kelowna today. And we've got our reporter, Kent Mulgat, out there trying to get some questions asked. That was from a different one. But if you look at that, Mark Carney, some of the people are pointing out there, not a lot of young people in that shot there in one of his meet and greets. But yeah, there you go. Mark Carney here in Kelowna. He's at one of the local hotels here. And we're going to see if we can get some comment. We're gonna see if we're going to ask him about Bill C-18. But we shall see.
Yeah, and a good time for him. I think we skipped over that other story of how apparently Carney is. I mean, it's just one poll, and it's really premature, I would say, because he hasn't been scrutinized yet, the way that Pierre Poilievre has been
Yeah.
scrutinized. But the poll suggesting that if he was the leader of the Liberals, then the Tories and Liberals would be even Stevens. They'd both be on, I think, 37%, which would mean a Liberal minority government propped up by none other than the NDP, I would suggest.
But
That's what that suggests.
the thought out there though is that because he is getting his honeymoon phase, is that he will call the election as one of his first acts as being named prime minister. Plus, he can't sit in parliament. Like he can be he can be the prime minister, never receiving a single vote from a Canadian. He can be the prime minister in name, but he can't actually attend the House unless he gets elected.
Yeah, and I would say it's been evident that Mark Carney, right from the beginning, really, when he officially announced, I think it's evident that he is a much, much smarter customer than Justin Trudeau. He's a lot more shrewd, and I really get the feeling that he knows what he's doing a bit more than was the case with Justin Trudeau, or still is the case. And I think he's going to be very, very well aware that the longer that situation drags on, of him being an unelected prime minister who doesn't even sit in the House, unelected in all possible ways, not even an MP, never received a vote of any kind for any political office. The longer that that stretches on, the more unhappy the Canadian people will be. So I think you're right. They're gonna want to do that right away. And they're also not gonna want to lose a confidence vote, are they? Because they're not gonna want to look like losers. Like the
Yeah.
first thing that Mark Carney does, they're not gonna want that first thing to be defeat in the House of Commons. So I think you're
Yeah.
right there. I think they will. I think they'll fire the gun themselves
Yeah,
right away.
it'll look like he's playing from a hand of strength as opposed to weakness and being forced to do it. And if he just says and plus I think the honeymoon phase gives him more strength because as the longer it drags out for him too, I think because he's still pushing a lot of the climate stuff that the previous liberals were doing. That I think that's the part that's like really tough for a lot of Canadians to swallow because of where the economy is. So I
Yeah.
would say that, and then if he has to deal with Trump and he doesn't come across as very good, that'll hurt him too. So I think his strongest moment is definitely going to be right away.
Totally. And he's also got some gaffes up his sleeve. I mean, I talk about him as being shrewder than Trudeau. I think that's evident to anybody that watches politics, I would say, dare I say. But he does have gaffes up his sleeve, like that incredibly asinine remark that he made about steel on a CTV interview. I think it
Yeah,
was CTV,
CTV.
where he
Yeah,
joked about how it's all right to put tariffs on steel producers because have you bought any steel lately? That was his joke. Like just such a gaff, such a stupid thing to say. So he obviously has. He's not like, he's not a robot. He's not like 100% accuracy all the time. Like he's going to screw up, and that's the other thing they'll be scared about. They don't want him to screw up, and he's also, he's been smiling a lot lately, and but he's not generally a smiley guy. So they're obviously trying to get him to be this like happy man of the people. But the more exposure he has to people, the more chances there are that he'll screw up. And I don't think he's the most like crowd pleasing, personable kind of guy. You know, he's not like, which is what Trudeau was. That was his strength. He's really good with people, isn't he?
No, he's
And he's very
charismatic.
like very friendly and touchy and huggy and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Whereas Carney can't really do that kind of thing. So I think that they're probably worried about that as well as time stretches on.
Yeah, he'd have a lot tougher time appealing to young people, as you can see in that room there. That he's appealing to like that strong liberal older base, right? So people that don't like change, right? So that's the people in that room.
Well, he represents, I would say the status quo, but it's not even accurate to say the status quo. I think he represents the past. He
Yeah.
represents a historical expression of Canadian governance, whereas um, Polyev is much more kind of an adaptation to new realities. And I think that is borne out by the fact that young people do support Polyev now. It's been a switch, hasn't it? Because when Trudeau won that majority in 2015, young people really, really came out for Trudeau, and he was seen as the change candidate and the kind of candidate of the future. I think that's completely switched now,
Yeah.
and Polyev is looked at as that kind of figure, whereas Carney, yeah, I really think he's like they love that phrase, don't they? The adults back in the room or something. I think he's going to go for that big time, and it's like, don't worry, all you nice old folks. Like I'll look after things, and I'll take us back to that nice old Canada that we all know and love.
Yeah, speaking of the other contenders in there, Robin Urbach from Globe and Mail wrote an opinion piece saying it's the wrong question to ask who can take on Trump because a lot of people in the polls think that Carney would be the best person to take on Trump. But Chrystia Freeland not getting a lot of love out there by media, but there is a piece here that's kind of saying that you know maybe that's the wrong question. And Chrystia Freeland putting out a lot of policy points that are very much in line with what Pierre Poilievre has been hammering to the public. And I mean, that's probably why he rose in the polls. And she looked at that and said, hey, if those are popular policies, then I should probably be pushing those forward.
Yeah, she's just, she's thrown the kitchen sink at it, I think. And it is very interesting. It's like there's no unless she just has the absolute worst media team in the history of Canadian politics or, democratic politics full stop. I don't know. I don't know if she's like just completely incompetent on the comms side or she's knocking on the door and nobody's listening to her because it's all Carney, isn't it? He's the
Yeah.
real carnivore and he's gobbled her up.
Yeah, no, she's definitely getting shunned. And she's the journalist. You'd think she'd have some connections and getting some airtime, but she's getting very little. We've reached out and asked, and we've actually asked Mark Carney to join us here today too. But you said they'd look at it, so we're not holding
Yeah,
our
I
breath.
think they weren't sure they were going to do any
Uh,
kind of interviews. Yeah, but just while you were chatting there, so you mentioned Carney's seen as being the best trusted to deal with the US. Just to add something out of interest, that Leger poll that suggests that a Carney-led Liberal party would be equal with the Conservatives in the polls. That same poll found that actually Polyev was slightly ahead, 22 to 20, as most trusted to deal with the US, which I do find quite interesting. I think that probably gives them hope. I would say the Conservatives that they can still kind of win on that because I think that's what scared them a lot is this brouhaha with Donald Trump is generally seen to favour the Liberals, but that suggests that the Tories could maybe salvage something there and actually put Polyev forward as the best negotiator.
and then our friend Ruby Dalla, she's like working social media better than any of them. Um, she's got her little photo up there with Tim Hortons. Someone should tell her that Tim Hortons is now an American company though, but they still fly the Leaf though. Um, but Ruby
I
Dalla
thought they
on
were
social.
Brazilian. I thought it was a
Oh,
Brazilian
I
equity
think you're
firm.
right.
I
I think
thought.
you're right. And
Yeah.
yeah, so but Ruby Doll definitely on social media, and I don't know if she's who's running her social media, but it's got to be a young person because there's a lot of like memes on there and stuff like that too. So she says she's ahead. Yesterday we showed the poll where she says she's got a 73% lead with the Liberal leadership candidates that get to pick here on March 9th. So interesting.
I mean, it's just like we've said a lot of times. It's kind of comic relief, isn't it? It's something a bit weird and a bit interesting, and
Yeah.
you don't get this very often. I've
Yeah.
in all my years of watching Canadian politics, I've not really seen anybody like this. So it's novel, isn't it?
She's definitely the dark horse in this race because Carney's clearly the front runner. It's his to lose, I guess you would say, based on the lead he has. Chrystia Freeland seems to be stumbling all over the place, and here's Ruby Dalla just in the background, like throwing memes out there. And then the other two you don't hear much at all from, right? Frank Baylis and Karina Gold. Not a lot of anything, right?
Yeah, Karina Gold's that's a mystery to me. I mean, I don't know who's thrown the money at her. I guess they expect that she's going to have a place in the government, that she's going to have a cabinet job, like a bigger one than she's had. She's head of the Commons now, I think, though, which is actually quite a big job. But I think it's all like jostling for position. It's just like we saw with like Vivek Ramaswamy in the US election, where you kind of like throw your hat in the ring, but you don't really think you're going to win. You just want to be noticed so that you can be put into a good job afterwards, basically.
So there's a lot of media and a lot of people out there accusing of Danielle Smith putting Alberta first, calling her a traitor, and a whole bunch of things. I'm going to play this clip here from the premier of Quebec. Oh, sorry, not the premier, the leader of the bloc. Yeah. So there you go.
Our energy has to serve Quebec first and foremost. And I will continue to say until the day we vote that there is no economic interest for Quebec in seeing a pipeline across Quebec that would harm the environment, and we would pay for that very, very dearly. We would have to repair the damage from that climate change, and we must not allow ourselves to be influenced by the West's desire and dream to get their oil to the other coast. You said it yourself.
So there you go, the leader of the bloc, Blanchette, putting Quebec first, and Danielle Smith getting a lot of trouble when she said Alberta goes first. So,
I mean, I would follow up that statement there with the question: is that really putting Quebec first? I mean, you could say, oh yeah, they're really big environmentalists there and they hate oil or whatever. But if you look at those polls, it looks from those polls, there's been more than one that suggests that the people of Quebec actually are majority in favor of
yeah.
new energy infrastructure. So I don't know, like, is it Quebec first or is it kind of vested interests first? Because I know there are a lot of powerful vested interests in Quebec that don't that really, really don't like fossil fuels, basically, and Western energy, if you want to sort of say it generally, because they have their own plans for how energy will be produced through hydro or whatever, or
Yeah.
solar and wind and things like that. But I mean, the problem with this attitude is, and I think you're right to mention Danielle Smith, because at what point, at what point do the kind of leaders of Canada, particularly in Quebec and Ontario, at what point do they sit down and say, okay, we actually have to come up with some kind of an offer for the west of Canada, particularly Alberta. We have to like give them a reason to want to be in this country. We can't just keep shafting them and taking billions and billions of dollars in transfer payments and then despising the source of those funds and trying to do everything possible to hinder more of that money coming out of the ground. It's kind of, at some point, something's going to snap, isn't it? And I just think this attitude from Blanchette it's just a bit foolish, it seems to me. Whereas Legault, who is the Premier of Quebec, he seems to have a much more like, he's a lot more moderate, a lot more sensible. I think he's conscious of these risks that Quebec runs, because it's not too dramatic, I don't think, to say that the future of Canada depends on the answer to those questions. Like, what are we going to offer Alberta? How are we going to figure this out?
Yeah, and maybe Danielle Smith's better investment would be to buy a nuclear icebreaker from the Russians, and maybe they need the cash as well. Might be a good time to reach out because
That would
that
be a
that
good way for Danielle Smith to be probably
really.
impeached or something.
But that port in Hudson Bay and Churchill would be like amazing for Canada if we could have that open all times of the year, because
Definitely.
it opens up a trade route, like especially to the UK, right? I mean, it would be great for the UK as well.
It would be great for yeah, for Europe. It would be a gift for Europe because they're now trapped into they're trapped into these like really long-term deals with like Qatar and Morocco and Algeria and you know these aren't these aren't really the allies of the
There,
West.
there's a
They're an
really
ally,
good
they're kind of partners of convenience. They're not really friends, you know?
there's a really good YouTube video out there on the Northern Passage, and saying if that passage is opened up, that could become the most economic passage in the world, bigger than the Panama Canal, bigger than the Suez Canal, because because it's the shorter distance, right? Because it's the top of the globe, right? So it is such
Totally,
an
yeah.
it is such an important trade route because again it's a shorter route and it accesses so many markets.
Absolutely. I mean, anybody that's read the history of the sort of the age of discovery in Europe. So like the sort of 15th century on, like Columbus and all those fellas, that kind of era of history. Like the prize, the absolute, the golden goose was the Northwest Passage, which they theorized existed, but it didn't really exist because it was all full of ice. But we now know that it does exist. And as the ice clears, it actually becomes possible. It's like there's a reason that, probably it's fair to say thousands of people have died in pursuit of that trade route because it is huge. I mean, and that was obviously before the Panama Canal. So if you wanted to go around, if you wanted to go west from Europe into the Pacific, you had to go all the way down past Argentina and Chile. Very dangerous um, route as well, like really, really risky route to go down. And obviously that's very laborious. I mean, in those days, if you wanted to sail from New York City to San Francisco, you had to go all the way down past Chile and all the way up. I mean, it's stupid. But the Panama Canal is it's not hardly perfect, you know. For one thing, it's in another country there, so that's like, as we're seeing with the Americans, like it's possible that you might be denied access to it at any point. But it's also quite kind of like tight and small, isn't it? And there's like often queues there. Same happens in the Suez Canal. And obviously sometimes like the Suez Canal gets blocked. So yeah, I mean, a sea route, it's massive. It's huge. It would change the world. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that. It would completely change the world.
So somebody just asked what is the name of that YouTube video. There's several out there, but I follow this young man, a Canadian actually, Jack Chappelle, and the title of the YouTube video is "Canada is quietly building the trading empire of the world," and it talks about the passage. So, um, it's a really good. He does a really good job in his videos. He does a lot of like explainer videos, and this is a really well done one, right? So, and again, Chrystia Freeland, friend of the show, right? It took our idea of the raise for 50% for the military. Maybe she'll take this one on, or Pierre Poilievre will take this one on and really put some money into the Northern Passage or the Arctic Passage, right? But again, you can go search on YouTube there. You can find it really easily by Jack Chappelle, Canada's quietly building the trading empire of the world. So important and so ignored, because Stephen Harper was doing some work in the north with a base and stuff like that, and then when he lost government, then it's just been kind of like sidelined or kibosh. I mean, we haven't done anything with our military. Our military should be at a full complement of 77,000, which is still very small. Sits at in the 55,000 mark, and like that. We talked about stories. If you watch the show often enough, like the sleeping bags we bought them aren't even. There's better ones at Canadian Tire, and we're expecting our soldiers to work in our north. So. Crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the money thing, man, that is, I don't think I'll ever really shut up about that. How unfair it is, but also how like counterproductive it is to pay your soldiers like less than $40,000 a year. That's how much a private gets. I think it's something like $37,000 a year, something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it's on their website. They tell you, like, that's not good enough, is it? Come on, for God's
No, and
sake.
then the bureaucrats are making like six figures, $150,000 a year for pushing paper around on a desk, and then refusing to come
Absolutely.
to work. And whether that soldier doesn't get to do that, he's like, well, he's like, I'm going to work from home today. No, you need to be in Afghanistan, or you need to be here. No, I'm going to work from home.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's like where are our priorities? And like I said, this is not about the market. This is not the free market deciding the value of somebody's services or somebody's products. Because you could kind of say that, couldn't you? It's like, why
Canadian
does
government.
Tim Cook?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could say, why does Tim Cook or whoever, like, why does Elon Musk get paid like billions and billions of dollars in or he didn't get paid, did he? That's another thing. But why do these CEOs get so much money? And then you could say, well, look how many products they sell. Like, why does Brad Pitt get so much money? Look how many people go to watch his movies and so on. Like, you can make that argument when it's a market question, but this isn't about the market. This is the government, and the
Yeah.
government chooses to pay. I mean, like,
That's the
I hate to
value.
pick on DEI, but I'm going to do it anyway. They pay like DEI assistant managers in the federal government six figures, like $150,000 a year, something like that. They pay like communications assistants, the people that I have to email, or well, usually it is email because they don't even have phone numbers. People I have to email to get a trite fake comment from a minister or something like that. They pay them over $100,000 a year to send emails to journalists. I mean, if you're doing that and giving soldiers less than 40 grand a year, your priorities are completely upside down.
It's
I just think it's obvious.
It's actually embarrassing that you ask these young men and women to put their lives on the line, and like you said yesterday, to actually go out and kill people in the name of Canada, and you're willing to pay them like a pittance compared to what you're willing to pay a bureaucrat that pushes paper around on a desk and like it refuses to go to work.
But it's a question like who's got the rarer and more valuable skill there, would you say? The person that knows how to shoot down an enemy aircraft from the ground, right? Is that person more valuable or more skilled than, or is it somebody who knows how to put everybody's name in an Excel sheet and figure out how much vacation time they have left? Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't mean to pick on those people. I realize that what they do is ultimately necessary, but which one's more valuable? To me, I almost just laugh at the idea that question's being asked. Surely it's the former that is more useful by
And
a factor of about 10.
but I guess we can't blame this all on the Liberals either, because there's been many governments before that, and our military has been in rough shape for a long time. And it's been like an afterthought in many cases, I guess, because we rely on the Americans so much. And it's about time that at least we have some pride. And if you want to talk about Canadian pride, make it so that people want to join the military and pay them decently and give them some opportunity. I was neighbors with, when I was living in Edmonton, two of the people across the road from me were both served on the Mayo Air Base. One was an accountant there and one was a flight engineer. And they get moved around a lot. They get a lot of different things. And I went to the Mayo base a couple times for like Oktoberfest and things like that. And they get, like I said, they get moved a lot. And they were both from Newfoundland. And there was a lot of Newfoundlanders in the military because the jobs weren't that great there. But we should make it more attractive for our young people for sure.
But you talk about being moved around a lot and a kind of quite a tough job, which is what is true of the military. But what does that sound like when you were saying that? That sounds to me a lot like an RCMP officer. And yet
Yeah.
RCMP officers basically start on 100 grand, just about that, or pretty soon they're on that anyway. It doesn't take them long. Why do they get paid so much more money? The answer is politics, I think, and decisions made at a political level.
Yeah. The military has not been a forefront thought for us, for sure. Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, as he likes to call himself, Mr. Wonderful. He wears a suit on top, and he usually wears those velvet velour pants underneath there if he's walking around. That's kind of his trademark. Mr. Wonderful. We're going to play a clip here. We're going to play it about the 120 mark. He's saying that the Trump tariffs aren't that real. He's just negotiating, and he's being his bully, doing his thing. And I tend to believe a lot of what he's saying here. Go ahead and play this.
And steel tariffs concern you?
No, obviously all tariffs you should be concerned about because it's escalating trade wars. But let's talk about tariffs in two verticals. Number one, what Trump is doing is looking all around the world, including Canada, and saying, well, it's an imbalance in tariffs, particularly with India, for example. They have some tariffs north of 20% on certain sectors, and he's going to balance that out. So if India is going to tax the U.S. at 24%, reciprocal on the same goods and services in the U.S., that's just making a level playing field. The Canadian thing is different. I think what's going on there is a renegotiation of NAFTA, if you want to call it that, because let's just take aluminum. The reason aluminum, 70% of the imports into the U.S. comes from Canada, is Canada has the cheapest power in North America. You need a lot of electricity to make aluminum. Most of us know that build data centers in the U.S. that there's no power left on the grid. Canadians have it in nat gas, they have it in hydro. So that's really a discussion about an integration of the economies that's beginning. Unfortunately for Canada, we're in a limbo zone there because the government has fallen and there's no elections for another 6 weeks. So we don't have anybody to negotiate with right now. Trudeau, as you know, has fallen.
Yeah, so there you go. You can go on there and you can watch that full clip if you want. But I do believe that we don't have a lot of strength in our negotiations because we don't have a clear leader right now. Like, I mean, it'd be great if the courts say we got to go back to Parliament and then we can elect a leader.
Yeah, we'll see, I guess. We'll see. That's something I forgot to say earlier in comparison with the one that happened in Britain. Is in Britain it was like after the fact. It already happened. Whereas they expedited this one, which is very sensible. They expedited this challenge, so it could theoretically, I mean, it wouldn't be all that much time, but they could theoretically save like a couple of weeks or something of Parliament or a few weeks, which would actually be quite consequential, wouldn't it? That would also suck for the Liberals, obviously, because then they would look like the party that had broken the law, like broken the sort of Canadian constitutional law or something like that. It wouldn't look good for them.
Daniel Smith out with another graphic there showing you how much the two countries kind of like work together. Again, you can go on Daniel Smith on X there and you can kind of look at that graphic in time though. And she said the Canada-US trade ties means jobs, energy, security. She's down in the States right now and she's one of the better voices, a calm voice. Economic growth on both sides. Alberta alone supplies 56% of the US oil imports, twice as much as Mexico, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq combined. That fuels American refineries and employs about 25,000 jobs there. It turns about $100 billion in Alberta energy into exports to $300 billion in value-added products. Meanwhile, 904,000 American jobs depend on trade with Alberta. Canadians spend over 7 times more per person on U.S. goods than Americans do on Canadian products. So she's bringing the facts, right? She's bringing the receipts. And I think that's what they need to bring. And again, we do have a friend in Jim Farley and some of these other people down there that I watch a lot of stuff out there. And there are a lot of people on that side of the border campaigning for Canada as well. I mean, a lot of people or if you're just listening to Trump, you're hearing a lot of his bullying tactics. And that's the way he negotiates, right? And a lot of times, if you look through his history, he backs off on a lot of stuff, right? But he just throws stuff out there. But it works for him. I mean, if you think about the border thing, we've got action on the border. To him, even though he bullied us, he would call that a success because there was not a lot of success in the border. But you definitely have to get some other voices in there to see what's really going on.
I would say though, I mean, maybe you could call that a success because that came after the menacing tweets, didn't it? In December, that's when they announced all this stuff. So maybe you could say, all right, look at that. That's Trump's success. That's how he does business, kind of thing. But I would feel like if you looked at the other consequences of him doing that, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, we're in the middle of it now, so it's hard to say one way or the other. But I don't know if the Canadian and American relationship is going to recover from this anytime soon. I think he's fundamentally poisoned the US-Canada relationship. And it might be that we might be wrong, I might be wrong by saying that, and it might actually all be, wine and roses in a few years' time and everybody's forgotten about it. But I don't know. I mean, listening to like David Eby on, I think it was on Monday, where he just said the US, or he was talking about BC, the BC US relationship will never be the same again. That's what he said. And I know it's like he's just one man and he's in the middle of it as well. But I do feel like this was such a massive shock to Canada. And if that's the real legacy of this, so he got this fentanyl czar, and he got a couple of other concessions from the Canadians, from the federal government. If that's his success, but then you put it next to the destruction of, or the severe disturbance of the US-Canada relationship, that's a no. I mean, it's obvious to me that it's a failure. It's a colossal failure of American diplomacy, then, isn't it? It's that would go down as one of the biggest political mistakes in the last 100 years from the Americans, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I watched that press conference there with Trump and Elon Musk yesterday when they was answering questions on Doge, and one of the questions from the reporters was like, like some of the stuff you've said has not been exactly true, like the $50 million for condoms that went to Gaza. Turns out the $50 million in condoms went to, I think, another country called Mozambique or something like that. And Elon's like, well, I'm going to get stuff wrong because I'm just throwing stuff out there. But he said still $50 million in condoms seems like a lot. So I think both of them are saying things that they're not exactly checking, and they're just throwing stuff out there and seeing what the reactions they get from people, and which is, like you said, not so great. I do want to say that somebody's commenting they found Jack Chappelle on YouTube. I can't seem to put the link on the TikTok, but I did put it on our YouTube. If you're watching live, you can go over to our YouTube on Kelowna Now. I did put the link to the Jack Chappelle video in the comments on our YouTube live stream. Oh, you'll copy paste it? Oh, okay, so there you go. Rommel's going to put it over there for you, and so you'll have that link to that. And you put up another one. Why are so many people in Canada sick right now? You were one of them.
Yeah, I've been sick for ages. I got this horrible cough. I keep muting my microphone so that I can cough my guts out. But well, the answer, if you
going to put it over there
want a
for
spoiler,
you.
the answer
so
is the flu.
There you go. I don't know what that Rommel was doing there, but we'll see. Yeah, so a lot of people are sick in my house. My daughter is sick right now, so there is a widespread flu spreading. And kids,
and there's also COVID there underneath, and RSV.
And kids are little petri dishes when they send them to daycare, and it's like they're the ones, and you have two of those little ones at home, right?
Yep, and they just have absolutely no concept of germ theory. These silly kids, They don't realize that if you put your hands in your mouth, that you're going to catch all kinds of viruses and stuff. So it's just nonstop fun with kids, really.
Our granddaughter goes to school, and Kim says when she drops her off there, like the other ones come right in the face, like right up to her, and they just start hi. So like they don't understand that you're spreading stuff. They're just kids, right? So
no, yeah, totally.
But it's also part of their immunity as they grow too, right? So there's that, right?
Yep, I guess so. But yeah, I mean, in that story anyway, which includes quite a few interviews with doctors, they say that as well. This happens obviously every year, but they're saying that this seems to be a particularly tough one this year, with lots and lots of particularly influenza, which is really we laugh about the flu, don't we? And just like it's just part of life and all that, but it's pretty serious ailment actually, and it carries off a huge number of people every year.
Yeah, the flu obviously making a dramatic comeback because during COVID it almost disappeared.
Yeah, it did, didn't it? That was very odd. I don't know. I don't think I can't remember having read why that was, but I would assume that it's something to do with all of the social distancing and things like that.
They explained it to us and said that like it was a real thing, that the flu disappeared. We almost had it cured, and all of a sudden it's making this raging comeback.
Wow. Damn the flu.
Damn the torpedoes. Gold up. This chart that I put up was a little while ago, but gold bounced again. So gold is actually up $7.10 right now. So gold at $29.05 American, and in Canadian dollars, what is that in Canadian dollars? You want to guess?
5,200.
You get a little carried away. 41.44 Canadian dollars.
It's not doing that badly, the Canadian dollar.
No, you don't need to help it down. Bitcoin Bitcoin, lots going on in the Bitcoin world. I listened to Kathy Wood of ARK Invest. She's got $1.5 million target on Bitcoin. And, she laid out a lot of reasons. You can go on ARK Invest, you can find that. But, again, people love to put out these targets, so it drives greed. Currently, right now, Bitcoin sitting at 97. It's very volatile right now. The chart I pulled up, again, at 8 o'clock was 95.5. Right now, 97.3. But it's still this hovering in that 100. We've been talking about this for a while. And you can see it in that mark there. You can see that band being built there. Canadian dollar. There you go. Again, that's the trade talks, tariffs. So it hasn't reacted to these aluminum tariffs, really. You know what I mean? It's kind of hanging in there. So maybe it doesn't believe that the Canadian dollar is not buying it yet. So we shall see, right? Canadian dollar is not buying the tariffs. It's looking for a leader, though. I guarantee you the Canadian dollar is looking for a leader. And even if that is Mark Carney, the dollar will react to it. The dollar will react regardless. Canadian dollar.
Well, and Carney, you would think, given his expertise and his previous career, you would think that he would know exactly the sort of things that would need to be said and done to get it up a bit. So,
but I do think that he may be missing what the Conservatives with a focus on our natural wealth will be what really drives the Canadian dollar, not policy that we've been following for the last 10 years.
Yeah, you would certainly you would think that on the face of it, wouldn't you? And I suppose as well, though, all the provinces, pretty much, even Quebec in their own way, they've all come out and said that they want to develop more of their natural resources. And obviously that's like a 50-50 area, isn't it? Federal and provincial. So you would think the dollar would have reacted to that, but I guess, well, unless it has a little bit, and that's what that little bounce is. But I think that's related to the tariffs being called off, isn't it? That little bounce.
It is the tariffs being called off. We have an interesting video here to play where Justin Trudeau was just at the AI Action Summit in Paris. And we have, I clipped it because it's long. J.D. Vance had like a 15-minute speech, and then Justin Trudeau's was shorter. But I clipped the kind of the pieces of it that were kind of like in juxtaposed to each other here. So here's J.D. Vance first and what the American government is looking at for the future of AI, which is so important to what's happening in the world right now. Probably the most important thing since electricity and industrial age. So here's J.D. Vance first and then Trudeau after.
Number one, this administration will ensure that American AI technology continues to be the gold standard worldwide, and we are the partner of choice for others, foreign countries, and certainly businesses as they expand their own use of AI. Number two, we believe that excessive regulation of the AI sector could kill a transformative industry just as it's taking off, and we'll make every effort to encourage pro-growth AI policies. And I like to see that deregulatory flavor making its way into a lot of the conversations this conference. Number three, we feel very strongly that AI must remain free from ideological bias, and that American AI will not be co-opted into a tool for authoritarian censorship.
Everybody is going to be having these conversations around AI, and that's a good thing. It's essential and it's important. Because not just it's going to transform our world, but how we do it thoughtfully, deliberately, responsibly is being decided right now. Wasn't being decided 7 years ago, certainly won't be decided 7 years from now. It's happening now. How we make sure that we have the energy to power AI in a clean enough way and an efficient enough way that's not going to set us back in our fight to reduce carbon emissions. How we move forward in responsible AI that actually isn't used for evil or to divide or to cause misinformation and disinformation to further destabilize our democracies. Mais le plus important, ce sera comment on...
There you go. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a clear left-right divide on all things to do with with the media and technology, really, where the priority of the left is how do we sort of control this, make sure that it doesn't destabilize things, and then the right is let's get it out there, let's develop it, and also let's make sure that nobody uses it for the purposes of censorship. So it's like censorship almost is that's where they really differ. Whereas bizarrely, the left is pro censorship and the right is very conscious and scared of it because they've been on the wrong end of it the last few years.
Yeah, it's a complete difference of opinion. And then I would say Kamala Harris would be very proud of Justin Trudeau there in that speech, because that was a really good word salad. That you didn't get a lot out of, other than I think the Canadian government has repeatedly said it's all about regulation, and most of the companies that are really leading in this area are definitely American-based companies, and that's the Sam Altman with OpenAI, Elon Musk with XAI. There's a whole bunch of them. Palantir, which is really doing well, and that's the military contractor. Jensen Huang with NVIDIA, and I could go on. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. And if these guys, if you want them to innovate, and the detractors from innovation would say that we have to slow down, the Europeans are saying that, and Justin Trudeau is saying that. The Chinese will not slow down. We're seeing that they're taking technology. Sam Altman just accused them of taking all the stuff that they had with OpenAI and putting it into DeepSeek. We don't have a choice to slow down. Like the cat is out of the bag, and if Justin Trudeau and his party are trying to slow it down by regulating, where do you think the capital goes then in Canada that has capital that wants to invest in AI? Do you think it stays here in Canada, or does it go to the US?
Of course. I mean, I was listening, I think it was on Monday, or might have been yesterday. I was listening to CBC Radio, and they did a little segment, like a news segment on AI because of Trudeau being at this conference. And it was surreal. I almost want to go back and get it and like put it in a time capsule or something because it was so weird. It was it's like an alternate reality where they were talking rather than talking about the innovations in AI, rather than talk about like Sam Altman and OpenAI and whatever else, all these companies that have been created mostly in the US and what potential they have and so on. Instead of that, they talked about how great the European Union is at regulating AI and how Canada is asking the EU to tell it, like to provide guidance on how Canada can regulate AI. And it was just all about regulation. And the thing that was so bizarre was that they talked about the EU in these like glowing terms. It was like, yeah, like the EU, that they're just the best in the world. It's absolutely the gold standard of regulating AI. I was just like, what what are you talking about? How is
Well,
that how is that like the priority?
I
Surely the technology itself is the priority, and the people that are creating the technology, they're the ones that you should want to imitate.
I would advise people just to go back and replay that clip and listen, and you can go find the whole clip from JD Vance's speech and Justin Trudeau's, and just play that. And then, and if you now put yourself in the place of an investor sitting in that room, listening to what both people are saying, and then ask yourself, where would they go? Because right now, I mean, as far as in the technology world, there's no borders for those people. They can go wherever they want, right? And according to the Trump administration, if you have $1 billion to invest, the door's wide open to the United States of America. And it doesn't matter if you're an American or not. They're going to deregulate and they're going to fast track you. And then compare that with what Justin Trudeau is saying. And you ask yourself, where is Canada's place in the new technology? It's called AI, which is, most people say, it's the leading technology since electricity, since the industrial age, since it's massive transformational technology. And then you ask yourself, what's Canada's place in that?
Yeah, maybe as a regulatory powerhouse, that might be the place that we get to. But if that does happen, and we don't in Canada concentrate on building our own, and Europe doesn't, then it's just going to be the same as it is with EVs, where people are going to be driving around American cars or Chinese cars rather than domestically made ones.
Where Canada does have strength, and it needs leadership, where Canada does have strength, it's energy. AI is an energy hog. And in Canada, especially Alberta, and we talked about this yesterday, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba are energy. It's an energy empire there. That is clearly like what Canada can offer AI, and it's in our land. It's in our land. It's beneath our feet, and there's no doubt about it. So the Americans aren't gonna, I know the Chinese or the Russians are gonna listen to Canada's regulation things. The only thing that we're gonna regulate is our own population. You're not gonna regulate the Americans. You're not gonna regulate the Chinese or the Russians or the Saudis, or for that matter, right? Do you think they're gonna listen?
But also, you say regulate our own population. I'm not even sure we're going to be able to do that because, as we've seen in the internet age, like the tech age of the last, like, let's say 30 years or something like that, it's very, very hard to legislate within just one country's borders because there are so many ways to just acquire that technology or to get onto certain websites or whatever, even if they're banned in your country. And I feel like with something like AI, if it has the potential to completely revolutionize a business model or something like that, people are just going to get hold of it somehow, aren't they? It's not. I just think it's like futile as well in the long run.
In our EV segment, automakers are lobbying against the lawmakers ending that popular EV tax credit in the United States that Donald Trump says he wants to end. General Motors and Ford are pushing back on it and say they want to keep it, go easy on the EV credits. And there you have a Chevy there that, I mean, they're starting to build more EVs, all the automakers. So they're pushing back on that as well.
They were given huge advantages by the previous administration, though, which refused to even acknowledge the existence of Tesla and started, whenever there was an announcement about EVs, it involved Ford, didn't it?
I mean, that's one of the reasons, I think, because Elon Musk was a Democrat and supported Democrats. He contributed to their campaigns. But when they held the big EV summit in Washington, Joe Biden did not invite Tesla, the leading EV maker in the world, to that, and instead said General Motors was the leading the charge. And there's a good slogan there, leading the charge in the world with EVs. And that was kind of like a good slap in the face for Tesla there.
Yeah.
Rivian R2. I have a deposit on this. The Rivian R2 are getting closer to coming around. They're showing some of their pre-production models there coming out because this is going to be a cheaper Rivian because the ones that are out there, the R1T and the R1S, are fairly expensive in comparison even to Teslas. But there's quite a few of them running around out there. I think they're more unique looking vehicle, but they got those weird looking headlights. Looks like an old Flintstones movie or something like that. But this is the smaller version of the Rivian. It's the R2 and supposedly going to come in, like half the cost of their bigger ones. And then a little more in the EV section, Los Angeles for the Olympics, the 2028 Olympics, getting a car charging road. This is supposedly the future too, right? So buses and that are actually charging as they drive on this green pathway. Pretty cool, eh? So your vehicle as it's driving is charging. I don't know what that does for all the electrical pulses that are going in your body. I don't know, but
maybe that's the next tinfoil hat thing, isn't it?
It might be those people that are chasing those those streams in the sky, whatever they call those.
Chemtrails.
Chemtrails. This will probably really drive people crazy. The buses would pick up charge while driving throughout the day or when parked at a stationary wireless charger. I know that Tesla's working with that too for the robo-taxi about driving pads, like in your garage and stuff. Instead of having to plug in, they just pull it, just like your phone. When you put your phone on those pads now, instead of like plugging it in. I use mostly at home. I put my phone on a pad as opposed to plugging it in, right? So I think a lot of people do that now, right? Charging pads.
Yeah, I mean, these are the sort of things that become possible when you're using electrified technology. There are lots more options, aren't there?
Yeah, we watched this. We had that great meme yesterday where we showed the EU wanting to regulate. I don't think that's what it was. We wanted the EU to regulate, or they wanted to make the breaking the bottle on a new ship easier, but that didn't work out very well, right? But you put a meme in here for the Gulf of America.
I just saw this on Twitter this morning. It really did crack me up. just the idea of because obviously a lot of people look at this renaming of the Gulf of Mexico as quite sort of crass, don't they? And in a kind of American way. And I just think, what is more crass in an American kind of way than that, than sponsoring the name of
Yeah,
the Gulf of America
Totino's
by with Home Depot.
Totino's Pete's Rolls presents Gulf of America powered by Home Depot. There you go.
Yep, why not?
And the king of memes and the queen of memes is Rui Dalla, but the king of memes is obviously Elon Musk, and he switched his. You got to listen to this clip from Dana Bash here on CNN.
Now, the disruptor in chief, Elon Musk, who apparently has adopted the alias, at least he changed his social media handle to Harry Balls, tweeted this morning, "Democracy in America is being destroyed by judicial coup. An activist judge is not a real judge."
And Elon's response to that tweet said, "Made them say my name."
He does. He does like a bit of childish humor, doesn't he? Now and then.
He's definitely juvenile in that respect, for sure. Because this all stems from one of the Doge engineers, software engineer. They got a few young software engineers working on the efficiency, and people getting angry. That I'm not sure why people are so angry about making hard-earned tax dollars more efficient and ferreting out the waste and corruption and abuse. Anyway, one of the engineers, his handle on X or somewhere, I don't know where his handle was, but his handle was Big Balls. And of course, the media was losing their mind over, this youngster that had this, like this horrific name, Big Balls, and they used it a lot. And I guess they get views out of it, right? But CNN's viewership way down, right? They're saying it's like at 553,000 or something a day. That's what the network's getting. We had some days on Kelowna Now that did that. So we're in good company, I guess. But yeah, so there you go. Big Balls. Or what's his name? Harry, whatever his name is now.
It doesn't really work in my accent because it doesn't sound like Harry when I say it. It sounds Harry Balls.
But he made Dana Bash say it. So there you go. So he, in his mind, winning, right? Kind of like
She should have said it in an English accent, and then it would have defeated.
Then it wouldn't have been. Then it would have been like Charlie Sheen there with his winning all the time, right? But it does seem odd. Like, and we need Doge in Canada. One of the comments was that we sure do. Like, I mean, Canadians work hard for their money, and they're paying, like close to half of it in taxes when you factor in, like the GST and the provincial, the HSTs, and all these other taxes. And you see some of the money where it's being spent, like when these politicians go abroad and spend $60,000 for booze and stuff like that at an outing. You're just like you couldn't do that, could you? Or do you do that? You spend that much on beer?
I do that, every now and then. Obviously, drop 60 G's on some some nice booze, but I think it's not even. That's actually quite mild in comparison to some of the stuff that is highlighted now and then that the government wastes money on. I mean, it's kind of like it is mind blowing how much money they waste sometimes. Even on a lot of these foreign aid things, where you talk about foreign aid, it's almost like sacred, isn't it? It's almost like it's protected by like a wall of priests or something. It's like the holy expenditure. Then you actually look under the cover, and it's just some of it is absolutely bananas. It's like teaching like gender theory to Afghan women or something like that. It's like what? How is that going to work? And sometimes it's like millions and millions of dollars as well, and it's kind of like it's as crazy as you could imagine. It's like hundreds of thousands of dollars to look at how some frog is represented in cinema or something like that. It's just like it's literally just money thrown down the drain.
So the future of government, and I've said this a while ago, I see a comment from Missy on our TikTok there. If the future of government, in my view, would be that Canadians get to vote, or any citizen gets to vote on every issue. You don't need politicians. So you wake up in the morning, your app has all the stuff loaded up by the bureaucrats, and like, what do you want to vote for? And then we get to vote on how we spend our money. And it would be the government, that'd be a true democracy where everybody gets to vote on every issue and where we spend our tax dollars.
That would be, there's a name for that, direct democracy. Whereas what we have right now is called representative democracy, where we're supposed to elect representatives to then act on our behalf using their own you know,
Right.
their own genius, their own moral compass.
And how does that work?
Direct democracy is used in Switzerland to some extent, famously. But I mean, the idea of making it on a phone, on an app, is that's quite an interesting concept. Yeah.
I was going to say, how's that working out for us right now with this representative democracy, where we have a government that's prorogued, and that it's a minority government, and they've been propped up many times because they're basically blackmailed, but they'll do anything to hang on to power.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's also obviously our particular version of representative democracy is called the Westminster system, like parliamentary system. And often, you know, people like to praise that system as being a lot better than the French system or the American system. But at a time like this, as you highlight, it doesn't really look all that resilient or effective, does it? I mean, it kind of looks a little bit messy and outdated. That the prime minister can, for transparently, for political reasons, can use the powers reserved for the monarch, use the king's powers to just suspend parliament, just like Charles I, who's sick of his parliament in the 17th century. You know, it's like at times like that, you think, is this the best system? And I think that's a good question to ask, you know?
And then somebody said bots could do, change everything, but I mean, you would just use verification. You'd do a bunch of different things. But I mean, right now, like you just said, we basically have, like a power that's been reserved for a king, and it leaves us in a precarious position.
I'd also say, when Parliament is in session, watch sometimes when the politicians do press conferences or whatever, or make speeches. Sometimes they will literally stop in the middle of the speech and get their phones out, get their iPhones out, and like look at it almost like they're taking a selfie. It looks pretty stupid, but what they're doing there is voting on a bill. So if it's good enough for our
they're already doing it.
MPs to vote in Parliament, then surely it's good enough for us.
Yeah, they're already doing it. Just it gives more voice to the people, right? So I think this Trudeau government campaigned on accountability and transparency, and you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that would stick up for that and said they accomplished any of those things.
Well, you hear a lot of people say the opposite, that they've actually worsened transparency.
Well, there you go. Everybody, a little homework for you. Go watch Jack Chappelle's the Arctic Passage, and maybe that's part of our solution for a better Canada for all. It could be the biggest trade route ever, like, again, eclipsing the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal, and Canada holds the keys. So it's up to you to raise your voice. We do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.